All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Looks like we're about ready. So now I'd like to introduce you all to Krista Cartson.
Hello and welcome everyone to our first virtual welcome session of 2023. On behalf of Welcome.us, I am your host and moderator, Krista Cartson. As many of you may be familiar, Welcome.us is a national initiative to mobilize all aspects of American society to help resettle newcomers at a moment of great challenge. First, the evacuation of Afghanistan, followed by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I am the Senior Director of Sponsorship Initiatives, and I consider my role to be providing you as welcomers with the resources and support you need to thrive throughout your sponsorship journey. So it is a tremendous honor to be spending this time with you. Over the next hour, we will hear an introduction from Nazanin Ash, Welcome.us's CEO, followed by a time of question and answer with 3 remarkable sponsors who will answer some of your questions that you posed during your registration and also live throughout this webinar. So please feel free to drop questions in the chat throughout this time we have together. And then we'll end our time with some very practical ways in which you can stay connected with us and with other sponsors as you welcome in action. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to my dear colleague and CEO of Welcome.us, Nazanin Ash.
Hi, everyone. It's really incredible to be with you this evening. I can't believe there's over 100 of you who are giving of your time tonight to learn about sponsorship and to hear from our remarkable sponsors. I think the most valuable part of this community is for you to hear from Lori and Abby and Grant about their sponsorship experience. I'm so eager for them to be able to tell you about what they've done and to answer your questions. So I just want to take a little bit of time to talk about our role at Welcome.us. And while that's our official name, I frequently refer to us as Welcome.us because, as you'll hear from our sponsors, it's as much about us and how welcoming is transformative for us and our communities as it is for the people that we're privileged to support. I often describe our mission as sitting at the intersection between the crises we see globally and the people and families who are impacted by them, and our desire to do something about it. So Welcome.us was stood up to help enable and empower Americans and our American communities to do what they do best and what they have a deep desire to do. Be a pathway to safety, serve as a guide, be a friend to someone in need, strengthen their communities. And with the innovations that have happened over the last year, there have been these incredible opportunities to bring Americans into the work of welcoming. As Krista described, that began with the Afghan evacuation and the tremendous outpouring of support from American communities who were seeking so many different ways to help. And our role at that time was to serve as a center of gravity for everyone who wanted to help and help connect them to ways that they could. But then when the crisis in Ukraine, the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened 6 months later, the US government, really seeing this tremendous capacity and desire from Americans to help, designed the Uniting for Ukraine program, which allows people to come to safety in the United States, but only with the support of an American sponsor. And that's where all of you and some of the incredible leaders we'll hear from tonight come in. Those pathways have now been expanded to include people fleeing political oppression in Venezuela and Cuba, people fleeing security crises and political crises in places like Haiti and Nicaragua. The US government is seeing the desire, the capacity, the willingness of Americans like all of you to do this work. And increasingly, they are creating the pathways for you to do it. And our role is to help. So Welcome Connect was designed as a platform for people who want to help, want to be that lifeline of safety, to find people in need who are looking for the support of a sponsor. And many of the systems and supports that we continue to build around it are entirely designed to support your sponsorship journey. And we're so eager to learn from you about what you want to do, what you need to do it, and how we can help. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation tonight. And again, so grateful to all of you, and especially to our amazing sponsors who will be sharing their experiences, for the time you've given us today and for your willingness to welcome. Thank you. Back to you, Krista.
Thank you, Naz, for introducing our audience to Welcome.us and our mission, our collective mission. Before we meet our panelists, I would like to take a minute to walk through the impact we've made together as a community of welcomers in this last year plus. So within this time period, we've seen over 195,000 Americans sign up to sponsor, and they have welcomed 103,000 Afghans and Ukrainians. These are really impressive numbers. These are big numbers, but I always like to think of these numbers in the context of even just one life and just one story. And that's why I'm really excited to be hearing the stories of Lori and Grant and Abby today, but also very personally, my grandparents were sponsored as refugees from Ukraine 70 years ago through a similar pathway. And so when I'm speaking just from my own experience, and it's just one story, and just like looking at this 103,000 is just remarkable to me, and just the future impact that sponsors like you are going to make in lives of people with each individual stories is really overwhelming to me. Then we take a look at the coalition of welcomers that we've developed as Welcome.us. 441 organizations and 221 leaders make up this Welcome Coalition and Council. And if you're curious about those names, I feel free to take a look on our website. They're listed there. And what to me this signifies is just the diversity of groups that have signed on to kind of acknowledge and celebrate this mission that we have of welcoming newcomers. They're from former presidents to celebrities to diaspora populations, faith communities, businesses, all coming together as the American identity of being a welcomer is really, truly moving. And then we've received support from organizations and private contributors in the $25 million plus range to provide support to frontline organizations. We've received private sector contributions, in-kind donations, and monetary donations that all are used to really link you as a sponsor with the resources that you need to thrive in your journey. So whether that's providing community level grants to organizations to provide you with those kinds of supports, resources like checklists and guides to give you the knowledge and tools to welcome newcomers well. Whether that's the Facebook group that we are just launching and you'll hear more about later, to kind of create a community of welcomers. As these panelists, they haven't met all together before tonight, but we want to create more of these engaging opportunities for you to meet other sponsors in your area and across the country who are doing the same thing as you and just joining that community. Lastly, Welcome Connect, the tool that Nazanin shared about earlier to enable you as sponsors to match with people who are seeking support and sponsorship. And what I'd like to do, speaking of Welcome Connect, is introduce you and play a short video that illustrates the story of two families, one American and one Ukrainian, whose lives were profoundly changed through this connection.
Globally, 100 million people are displaced, with only 1% of refugees likely to find a new home. Russia's war in Ukraine alone has uprooted more than 13 million.
Були однією з багатьох щасливих сімей в Україні.
Максим навчався, ходив в футбольну секцію, Аліса займалася фігурним катанням, гімнастикою. У нас все було добре. Ми не очікували такого, що произошло.
Then missiles struck close to the Yeremenko's apartment. The family fled to Poland.
Залишились Алісіни коньки. Ну, її там форма, її одежа, для неї це було, так знаєте, вибачте.
Looking to rebuild their lives, they set their sights on the US. But to qualify for a visa, they needed to find an American to sponsor them.
Ukrainians and Americans were finding each other on social media, but there wasn't a safe, trusted way for sponsors and Ukrainians to connect with each other.
So Welcome.us created one, an online portal to match refugees and sponsors.
With partners like Goldman Sachs and Infosys, we built Welcome Connect. It wouldn't be possible without ServiceNow creating technology that delivered on this incredible tool for empowering humanity.
Там я побачила, мабуть, вспливаюче вікно Welcome Connect. Зареєструвалась, стали доступні спонсори. Ебі була перша, кому ми написали. Ця сім'я по всім, так сказати...
З першого погляду.
Так. Це кохання з першого погляду, так кажуть.
I think you could definitely classify us as a generic American household.
We saw videos of people welcoming refugees from Ukraine in, and I was like, you know, we can do that. We can help someone.
So after we connected on the platform, Ira and I really just started chatting back and forth through the message function. We didn't realize that the communication was being automatically translated for us.
Happy birthday to you.
Hopefully when they get here and walk in, they'll feel at home and comfortable and safe.
Only 60,000 Ukrainians fleeing Russia's war have found sponsors in the US.
It's a big responsibility, but it's not as hard as you think to help people.
Ми знайшли нових друзів і сподіваємось на те, що ми здобули нове безпечне життя.
I hope they're prepared because we already love them like one of our own.
So as I mentioned, this convening this afternoon is the first time all of these three panelists are together, and we just spoke briefly before you all joined, and I said I had this feeling of like there should be a word for this feeling of multiple people that you admire all together in the same room, kind of meeting each other for the first time. And I have that feeling again now that you all have joined us as well. So we are joined today by three compassionate Americans like yourselves who decided to welcome Ukrainians fleeing their homeland and help them build new lives in the United States. You will hear from them this evening about their sponsorship journey and why they decided to be a welcomer. I'd like to first introduce you to Abby Teigland. I hope you recognize her from the video, and it is such a pleasure to introduce you to her live. After seeing videos of other refugee families being welcomed into the United States, Abby and her husband decided to help a family in need. Shortly after completing their profile on Welcome Connect, Abby connected with a woman, Irina. Her goal for Irina's family was to help them find a safe and comfortable landing spot in the United States, and she accomplished just that. The Teiglands embraced Irina, her husband, and their two children into their home in Kansas. We're also joined by Lori Cure. Lori Cure is a PhD. She is the CEO of Innovative Connections Incorporated, a leadership consulting firm. She lives in Colorado with her husband of 30 years and their adult children. They have a multi-generational household, which includes Lori's mother, and they enjoy gardening and raising their multitude of animals. Lori and her family were moved to act after President Obama's speech about the crisis in Ukraine. Lori connected with a beneficiary named Eli through Welcome Connect, and they began to get to know each other more. And it wouldn't be long before Eli would find a new home with Lori and her family in Colorado. Since moving to Colorado, Eli has gotten a full-time job working for Xfinity Comcast, doing installation work. And lastly, Grant Jones. Grant is a former high school English teacher, currently working from home, developing educational software. He has lived in New York City, Baltimore, and the Netherlands, but has spent most of his life in North Carolina, where he currently resides. Grant and his wife, Heather, are sponsoring 23-year-old Maria, who arrived in the United States in September of 2022. Grant started his sponsorship journey by registering on Welcome Connect and getting connected with Maria via the portal. Grant and Maria bonded over being both raised by their grandmothers. Grant, his wife, and their 2 kids welcomed Maria into their home as a family in Winterville, North Carolina. This is his first time sponsoring, though he plans to bring more folks over from Ukraine, beginning with Maria's sister and nephew this spring. So it is my pleasure to introduce these 3 sponsors to you. And what we've all been waiting for these last 17 minutes is to hear directly from you 3. So Abby, Lori, and Grant, I'd love to hear from you more about how you learned about Welcome.us and what ultimately made you decide to go through with this process of sponsoring. And we'll hear first from Abby, then Lori, and then Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Krista. I'm so excited to be here and share our story. My family's traveled to Europe a few times, and Ukraine is always a country that I have wanted to visit, never had the chance as of yet. But so as soon as we found out that the attack had happened back in February, we were following day by day, watching as the invasion progressed and wondering how we could help. Initially, I told my husband at one point, if I were, a younger version of myself and didn't have kids and a family to take care of, I would have went to Poland to help on the border and hand out, food and blankets and help refugees however I could that way. But that just isn't possible when you have 2 young kids and, a livelihood here. So we were just following as everything progressed and looking for ways to help, and had been, scrolling social media as I do, and found out the Welcome.us was forming and providing a program where we could sponsor. So immediately, as soon as the website was up, I posted my email address, filled out the form, and just followed the progression of the program, made my profile as soon as I could. And then anticipated the day that the Ukrainians could log on to look for sponsors. So I was ready and waiting at my computer that day, just to see how quickly things would happen and what would happen next. So it felt like it all happened really quickly. I know the first day that the platform had opened for Ukrainians to go and search for sponsors, I got the first request was actually from Ira and Kirill, so the family that we ended up sponsoring. And then immediately after that, I got like 3 more requests. So I was at work getting ready to go into a meeting, and I had these requests, and I was just overwhelmed seeing the different stories and the different people and wanting to connect and help. So, I had to hold myself together through a couple of meetings, and then rushed home to share with my husband about what had happened, the stories, the profiles, and we kind of evaluated them all to see what would be a good fit. And we began having contact with the Yarmenko family. They're very similar to us. We both have daughters that are the same age. And it kind of like in the video, it said it was love at first sight. So many similarities. We've become great friends, and it just progressed from there.
That is amazing. Thank you, Abby. Lori, we'd love to hear your story about how you've learned about Welcome.us and what made you decide to go through the process of sponsoring.
Yes, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm struck by the similarities that you will likely hear in our 3 stories. And probably for those on the phone, there's some similarities that you're experiencing as well as you're beginning this potential journey. For my husband and I, we have been called to refugee issues for quite some time. Probably the Syrian crisis in 2018 was our big place where we just felt such a deep calling. We live in a smaller area outside of kind of our more metropolitan districts. And so there was never really an opportunity to be more directly involved in some of those other refugee crises that had been occurring prior to this one. Similar experience with Afghanistan when that happened in the August of, I don't even remember what year, just a calling and just such a deep feeling of needing to support and help. And we did so in the ways that we could, but we were really feeling the need at some point for a more direct way of assisting. I did not know about United for Ukraine when the war started in February. Like Abby, we found ourselves just heartbroken, just absolutely heartbroken. I saw somebody put some little tear emojis in the comments. So I can totally relate to that experience, because it just, you watched it and you watched the tragedy and the pain, and it's so senseless. So to sit there and think, you know, what can you do? How can you support? We're just the kind of the narrative playing in our heads. Again, I didn't know about United for Ukraine until probably, I don't know, maybe May of that year. And we initially saw it from a post on Facebook, President Obama's post on Facebook. And immediately I showed my husband, and he's like, yes, let's do this. So we kind of went through, we didn't sign up right away. We were probably a little bit more hesitant, like, okay, is this legitimate? It felt like it was, so that felt good. I think, you know, recognizing that Welcome US is such a credible organization allowed us to go forward with this process with a level of trust that was really important. So I will just say that for any of you who have any hesitations. For us, that was a really critical piece. So we went through all of the videos, we watched all of the trainings, which I found just incredibly helpful to kind of understand not only the role that we were expected to play in the journey, but also how to be in relationship with someone who's coming from this situation from another culture. So after we had gone through that whole process, we went ahead and signed up. Like Abby, we had a number of requests relatively quickly. And the stories are heartbreaking. That was probably one of the more difficult things to do at the very beginning, is have a dozen individuals with just very difficult stories and trying to figure out what's the best match for them and what's the best match for you, knowing that you really want to help so many people and you're in the process of trying to find one that's going to be the best linkage. So some people needed more support. Some people needed less. Some just needed somebody that could fill out the paperwork so they could join family who was already here. We had some resources available for housing and those kinds of things. So we were looking for someone who was interested not only in our area, but that might benefit from some of that support. So we found a nice connection with Eli. Originally, you know, we were looking at his family coming over. His wife and daughter have decided to stay in Poland for the time being. They're at a safe location there. And so we've kind of walked the journey from that lens.
Remarkable, Lori. Thank you. Grant, we'd love to hear your story too. How did you find out about Welcome.us, and what made you decide to go through the sponsorship process?
Sure. I couldn't tell you how I did, because I was down so many rabbit holes trying to connect with Ukrainians that I'm sure it was Google or perhaps United for Ukraine, how I heard about it. But like the two other fellow sponsorees, I saw the images on the screens of my television and my phone, and you know, was devastated. But I knew that I got into a place of life that I had the time, the means, even the finances to help. And that if I sat there continuing to watch these atrocities and doing nothing, I was going to have a real problem with self-respect, you know. But the problem was I didn't know what to do. I wanted to help, but I didn't know. So then I started seeing places like Slovakia and Poland, United Kingdom, welcoming in tens of thousands, in Poland's case, millions of people. And I hope that our country would do its part. And eventually United for Ukraine was created, and the administration announced that 100,000 Ukrainians would be allowed to come over. And so at that point, I understood what I could do. I could host. That's one thing that my kids were old enough, and my wife was behind me, and we could do that. But I still had a big problem. I am not Ukrainian. I don't speak Ukrainian, and I didn't know any Ukrainians. So I was stuck with a huge desire to help, but no outlet. So like I said about the rabbit holes, I went to other websites that promised to connect with Ukrainians, all dead ends. I even drove halfway across the state to Ukrainian churches and asking, and it's, you know, I eventually thought, because I live in this small town of 10,000 in Eastern North Carolina, you know, maybe there's no place for me in this process. But one day I got this email from welcome.us and it says, come create your portal, start speaking with Ukrainians. And because to that point, I was really not familiar with welcome.us, what they had done with the Afghans, it never reached me. And so I was honestly just as skeptical as every other of the rabbit holes that I went down. But within 24 hours, I created a profile, talked about my family, talked about the place that we live. And I got, that first day, I heard back from Maria, who ended up being our sponsoree. She lives in a city that had been bombed recently, in a city where from her apartment balcony, they had built a pop-up army base, which made her very nervous for future rocket attack. And so, we got to speaking, and then some others came in, and I think the speaker Laurie was talking about, that is the difficult part of saying no. I had a woman who's had lost her home in the 2014 invasion in Mariupol, slowly rebuilt it and lost it again last year in the second invasion. And I just wanted to help that woman so much, but she wanted to come over with her husband, 4 children, and her husband's mother. That's a family of 7, and we're a family of 4. And part of the process is realizing what a right fit is, and I didn't feel like we could give her what she needs. Others wanted to sign with me and then move to California, across the nation, in places where I didn't feel comfortable, because I wanted to make sure I could provide for them. So I think it's important to find someone that you can fit with and that you can provide them, because every family has its strengths and its weaknesses. So finding someone that you can really maximize your family's strengths and providing is an important part of it, and a reasonable part to expect. For Maria, it's been a wonderful fit. We expected to bring over more, but she was, we sort of hit it off, and I couldn't be happier with the situation.
Amazing, Grant. Thank you. What I've heard from all 3 of you, I've heard a few patterns about your experiences, but one thing was just you heard and you were moved by compassion with what you saw in the news and what was happening, and you decided that you had a part to play in supporting people. And we talk about sponsorship as the ultimate act of welcoming and serving and responding to what we're seeing in the media and what is happening in our world. So Abby, I'd love to hear more about your sponsorship journey and how you came to understand your role as being a sponsor, and what do your day-to-day responsibilities look like as a sponsor?
Yeah, thanks, Krista. So I definitely, right off the bat, I had my own mental checklist going, but then I found the ones on welcome.us, and they were super helpful. There are lists of tasks that need to be done before your family or your sponsoree arrives. What to do the day of, the weeks that they're there, 1 month in, 2 months in. So those were very helpful, especially with some of the, applications and forms and government type paperwork that they would have to do, because I wasn't super aware of those kinds of things. So that was very helpful. And there's also lists that if you wanted to divide up the workload among friends or family or other people that are interested in helping support as well. So, I had a friend that wanted to help, and she kind of took on some of the healthcare things, and so we kind of divvied up the tasks, and that was really helpful. Once the community found out, it was, the response was amazing. We utilized Nextdoor, so like a Facebook or something like that in the community. And so I hopped on and I was just like, hey, I'm looking for a place for this family to live. And immediately I was getting donations for the family, clothing, furniture. We found a place for them to live, and honestly, the community stocked it all. And our goal had been that this family would walk in and feel at home. Me and my friends that were kind of helping with this process, we all have young kids, and we have no idea what it was like, what this family went through, but we wanted their kids to just walk in and feel at home, to have toys and to have a bedroom that was catered to their interests, and just somewhere where they could relax and feel at peace. And the community stepped up incredibly for that. So we had a fully furnished apartment for them, fully stocked pantry. They had a vehicle. There was even a GoFundMe that so many people wanted to contribute. And at one point we were like, we don't need any other physical items at this time. So we received so much support from the community. So I would highly recommend just telling everyone that you know that you're going through this process, and you will be amazed at the support that you get. So that was kind of our journey up until they arrived. The first week was very busy, getting kids caught up on immunizations. I think kind of the first thing on our task list that was important to the family was getting the kids into school, getting them back to a normal routine. So that was kind of the things that we hit first to help them acclimate and adjust to life here.
Amazing, Abby, thank you. And something that I've heard in speaking with different sponsors is, people are sometimes timid to ask for help or tell their community, we're doing this great thing, but really it's you and in your community can do this great thing. And it's really extending an invitation. I think a lot of folks are watching the news and wondering what to do. And you might be surprised once you say there is something that we can do, what kind of tremendous response you get from your network. And Abby, it sounds like you certainly got a tremendous response. You also mentioned a checklist that you used that Welcome has, and I'm really glad that you mentioned it because someone also asked about resources. So we dropped a link in the chat for anyone who's interested. We got a live request in our Q&A function. So please make sure that you are able to click on that link and access the checklist that Abby mentioned and all the other resources too that might help fill in some of the gaps that you are looking for. So Grant, we had the opportunity to chat a few weeks ago about Maria and how your community has welcomed her so well. Can you speak more to like your and your family's relationship with Maria once she arrived into your community?
Sure. I would say it's one that she's been here living in our house actually for 4 months. So it's been one that has shifted over time. At first, it's friendly, but distance. We'd been chatting for a month before she came over, but ultimately you're still bringing a stranger into your home and we're strangers to her. So there's a little bit of feeling out time, but it was always friendly. But I would say the first real relationship was sort of like student and teacher, mentor. So just little differences that are here, whether they're cultural, whether they're just something as small as sales tax, the price you see on the shelf is not the price you pay at the register, a million little things like that. In her case, we knew she was going to need to learn to drive and she had a desire to, but she had never driven before. So I opened up the Grant Jones School of Driving and taught her over the past 4 months how to drive. And I'm proud to say 2 weeks ago, she passed the written with 100%. And last week she got her driver's license within 4 months. So yeah, there's that. And then I think another huge component, because there is so much work to do, most of the government paperwork, but more than you think, also just getting phone lines that work and all these sort of things that you really need to think of any adult in the family that you sponsor as a partner, an equal partner in business or however you want to call it, but you've got a lot to get done and you need to be equal partners in that. So while there's a little bit of disconnect of you're at the advantage of being sort of a teacher to a new world to live in, that part of getting all the work done, you need to make sure that they have equal sort of say in that and that you're on equal footing. For us, the third component, for me and Heather, and it came later for my daughter, she declared Maria her best friend on the day that she arrived. But I'm really glad to say that now, 4 months in, I really do consider her a friend. I was not sure how to think of it before she arrived. Is this going to be a burden? Of course it is on some level, but really it's a blessing. And so we watch movies together. We've gone to the beach as a day trip, to Raleigh, this is the state capital, some other cities like that. And she plays my son in ping pong. She used to do it competitively when she was younger. And so she will listen like an older sister when my daughter brings home gossip from middle school. And she eats dinner with us every night that she can. She's got a job now, so she's not here. But when she's not here, we're all looking at each other. So we're like, oh, where's Maria? So it's teacher and student to a degree. It has to be because they're a newcomer and you have to explain the world. It's equal partnership in getting them the needs that they do. And then in my case, very satisfyingly, a friend.
That's beautiful, Grant. Thank you. I love that imagery of a partnership and how you stepped up to support Maria in her time of need. And she's also just added so much value, it sounds like, and joy in your life and in your community. Lori, we'd love to hear more about your partnership and your community's partnership with Eli. What has been a challenging experience and what has been a rewarding part of being a sponsor?
I'll start with the rewarding piece and kind of piggyback on what Grant shared, because that was somewhat unexpected, just the relationship and how easy the relationship happened. So for us, Eli doesn't live in our home. He has got a separate apartment that he's in, but joins us most nights for dinner. We do a lot of activities together. We actually last weekend did a painting class. So those are the kinds of events that you learn a lot about each other in. But what I have been surprised about and just delighted by is how easy the relationship was to create. Eli spoke English pretty well. So early on, we were really able to delve into some deep topics and talk about a lot of not only the cultural differences, which I'll talk about later, but also just some of the issues that America experiences that are very different from what they might be used to in Ukraine. We talked about racial relations and tensions that occur in the United States and some of those issues that are so central in our media. We talked about LGBTQ issues and non-traditional. We have non-traditional family structures, and so what does that look like and mean? And so we were really able to kind of go deep pretty quickly, and it's been such a blessing in our relationship to hear his perspectives, for him to learn from our perspectives, to just know that there's this place for mutual understanding. And we have gotten to the point, where you've built a friendship. His wife and daughter are still in Poland, but we have a chance to connect with her frequently on WhatsApp, and so we stay connected there. Hopefully, at some point they'll make a decision to come as well. But for right now, just really kind of keeping connections solid. So those are the benefits. The benefits are so I can't even describe that feeling. It's probably, Krista, that word that you were looking for when we were talking about it at the beginning. So just understanding that there's just such a deep sense of connection. There's also a community that you build. So, like Abby shared, once you start telling people, they tell their friends, and then their friends contact you. And so we don't have a Ukrainian community, or at least I didn't think so, in our area. And once you start sharing, all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, I'm sponsoring too, and here's what you need to think about, and here's what I learned. And so everybody kind of comes together. We've done a number of dinner parties with other individuals who are sponsoring, all at different levels. So some individuals have sponsored similar to the way we have, where you're actually bringing them very close into your circle. Others have just decided to sponsor in paper only. So it's any piece and part in between. So there's so many ways that you can step forward and help and support. So those are the benefits. I think the challenges at first were it's a process. You feel like you're kind of engaged in this business relationship because you're filling out paperwork and you're getting things started. And once they arrive, you're making sure that there's their TB test and they're getting signed up for things. And there's just a lot of complexity in the process of work permits and all of those pieces that I underestimated. So I think that was probably one of the challenges. I think the other challenge, and I don't know if it's a challenge or a benefit or maybe a little bit of both, is that it's a relationship and we're all still human. Their experiences have been incredibly significant, and I can't even comprehend that. And so to know how to show up in those relationships, to know how to best in the most healthy way navigate those complexities, sometimes has been a challenge. Recognizing what we can speak and what we can bring forward, and what's not safe for them to share and speak. One of the things we've done a few little media events, and there's not necessarily a trust in media. So that, how do you kind of navigate some of those just cultural issues in just the human experience?
Thank you so much, Lori, for that really candid assessment of how sponsorship has affected you. I think something that speaks to both of those the challenges and the successes of sponsorship is this, that we're doing this in community and learning from each other and with each other. And that's one thing I've heard from you and others. And that's why Welcome.us just recently launched a sponsor Facebook group. And so again, I wanted to just to give a little plug, we will drop that link in the chat later on or right now. And also you'll all receive an email after the webinar with that link as well to join. But we want to create and foster opportunities for you to build community with other sponsors and learn from each other and share your experiences. And that's one way that we want to really amplify that success and that those joys of sponsorship. So now we're going to transition. We've received some of your questions on Zoom, and we're going to transition and address a couple of those right now. And the first one, I'm going to turn it over to Abby to answer you, because you mentioned, Abby, that you spoke with a few different families, and then you found Irina just the right family for you and your community. How many different people did you speak with before finding the right one, and what made you decide to ultimately match with Irina?
Sure. So I actually got requests from, I believe it was 4 different individuals, families, different situations. And we stopped and evaluated them all because honestly, I couldn't bring myself to connect with someone if I knew that we weren't going to follow through. So I didn't actually respond to the other 3 inquiries that I got, just because I didn't want to open the doors. Like, I couldn't do it. So Ira was the first and only connection on the portal that we connected with. You know, when we chatted for a little bit and slowly gained trust, you know, we tashed through the portal, and then we shared social media. So, you know, you could see a real person behind who you were talking to. She saw my Instagram, I saw her Instagram. And, you know, you could scroll back through the history and kind of figure out what kind of person and family they are. And we just found so many commonalities between the 2 of us. You know, we both love to travel, very adventurous, career-oriented people, and we have daughters the same age, so we could connect on all of the mom stuff as well. And I think in the end, you know, they didn't need a lot of financial assistance. So, you know, we felt like we could support them in anything else. We knew we were going through the process of enrolling our daughter into kindergarten. And so we knew that we could easily walk them through those steps. We have a friend group here, so we knew that we would immediately have, you know, other kids for their kids to interact with, and a community that was kind of in the same spot in life as they were. And I think that was one of the reasons we sponsored to begin with, because we put ourselves in their shoes. If we had 2 young kids and a war broke out, what would we do? We would get our kids to safety. So from this side, we understood why they were doing what they were doing. And, you know, we had the means to help support them at this stage in their life. So I think that's ultimately why we matched with the Yareminkos, is we understood what stage of life they were in, because we're in the same. And so we were able to see and anticipate some of the needs that they had and meet them.
That's amazing, Abby. It sounds like, yeah, the immunizations, the school enrollment, it's a lot of things that you were doing as a family already. And to add a few more, you know, to transform a family's life is just remarkable. Thank you for that. And Grant, you spoke about the driving school that you just recently opened, and different ways that your family has really welcomed Maria well into your life, into your community. Can you tell us more about her first month of arrival and what kind of support you provided her with, and what kind of time commitment that looked like for you?
Yeah, it's so the first month. So it's a lot. Not gonna lie, because there's a lot to get done. But if you prepare, and I think Welcome.us and United for Ukraine has a bunch of great resources. They're very helpful to me. It's creating a roadmap of what you need to get done. It does vary a bit from state to state, from county to county, but it gives you the basic roadmap to get it done. There's SNAP benefits, the first thing you want to get, so like food stamps, refugee medical assistance, which is a mirror to Medicaid, work permit, other stuff I can't even remember. In my case, in my county, she was as far as we could tell, the only Ukrainian sponsoree to apply for these benefits, because they kind of started out denying her everything. They weren't aware of this. So she was denied for Medicaid, for example. So I thought, this can't be right. So I went and looked back at the resources on your website and United for Ukraine, and from there was able to print out the state laws and the federal laws that said that these humanitarian parolees from Ukraine are allowed to have this. And so I printed them all out and went to work with my highlighter and took them back to the Human Services office and politely, but said, this is the law. And from there, it was kicked up another level. And from there, those people worked hand in hand with her and I to get her everything she needed. So it can be it can feel slow and frustrating in the moment. But looking back, I think 4 or maybe 5 weeks, she had SNAP benefits. She had Medicaid. She had a work permit. And that's pretty fast when you look at it. But I don't want people to think about that first month as being some sort of bureaucratic misery. The truth is, it's very satisfying to fight for someone's rights. They realistically can't do it alone, especially if there's a language barrier. And so it's a rewarding process, and one that's over much faster than you can imagine. To get her set up, and now she's got a job. She just started a second job. She's driving herself to the job, and this is just 4 months in, and she's incredibly self-reliant. I almost want to ask her every day, isn't there something I can do to help? but she's gotten where she is. Now, during that first month, while you kind of need to always sort of be available for situations, there is a lot of downtime. So in Maria's case, she described the first 2 weeks as a surreal dream, because while she is her English is quite good, but she hadn't taken it since 10th grade. And so coming into a place where she was alone and the only family she's around speaks English, and no one speaks Ukrainian, she would often go to her room, A, to recover and relax, B, to check in with family, check in on the war situation, sometimes just to listen to Ukrainian music or Ukrainian movies so that simply she could hear her own tongue, her native tongue from time to time. And those hours were useful to me. I could get work done. I could run errands. I could take my kids to school and back. So because of their need to sort of slowly adjust and sometimes be alone either as a family unit or as an individual, that first month comes with plenty of downtime that you can utilize to get done the things that you need to do. In the end, I would say it was worth it. I look back at that month with a lot of pride, and I know she does too.
As you should, Grant. Thank you so much for sharing that. Lori, I'd love to hear more from you about the cultural differences that sponsors should be aware of, and what things Americans can do that may be a culture shock to families coming to the US, and what can sponsors do to help ease that transition and welcome newcomers well.
Yeah, so this might be an incorrect assumption, but it felt like sponsoring a Ukrainian sponsoree was maybe less of a culture piece in our experience. I think there were some little things like, we stocked the apartment and had coffee and a coffee pot, and tea is a really prominent drink. So while we had tea, we didn't put a big enough teapot in there. So there was just some little things like that, water from the tap, and just different kind of food preferences. We laughed because Eli was so shocked at how wide the roads are in Colorado and how much traffic there is. So just some of those little cultural things. I think probably the biggest cultural piece was what I started to share a little bit earlier, which is in the experience that we've had, we have observed just very traditional gender roles in the Ukrainian culture. And so that's been an area where we've had a lot of conversations and dialogue, and just kind of talked through, what does it look like differently here versus their communities. So that's kind of one area where we've had some good discussions. Trying to think if there are any other big ones. Animals is probably one that surfaces. We have dogs and cats. We have a small little flock of chickens, and we've laughed sometimes because he spoke about how his grandmother had chickens, and we're really good to our chickens. so it's kind of funny to him because we make sure that they're warm and they're taken care of and they have little treats, and so just the care that Americans seem to provide their pets feels a little different than what he's experienced in the past. So that's kind of another little one. So those were some of our experiences on the culture side.
Thank you for sharing that, Lori. When I read your intro about your animals, I didn't know what animals those were. So I'm glad now we know. That's really, really sweet. Well, thank you all. I want to be mindful of the time. It went by really quickly, and we haven't had the opportunity to address all of your questions in the chat, but we're going to save those and be responsive to them in the future through other webinars, and considering in our own Q&A that we post as well. And if you haven't seen those, please do feel free to reach out to us or take a look at our website and that resources page on our website. I want to thank our panelists so much for spending your evening with us. I'd also like to kind of, as we wrap up, think about ways that we can stay engaged. I think this is the beginning of a journey for many people who are joining us. So I'd love to share different ways that you can continue to stay engaged with welcome.us in your journey and how we can best empower you in your journey. So you will all receive an email following up on this that includes several different links. And I want to take the time just to kind of give you all a heads up of what to expect. First and foremost, if what you heard from Grant and Lori and Abby today has moved you, has compelled you to find out more, I would really encourage you to complete your profile in Welcome Connect, and just take that next step of speaking with Ukrainian families. You heard from Abby about her experience connecting with several different folks, and determining who might be the best fit for their community. Lori and Grant did the same, based on the resources that you have, based on your family and your capacity to welcome, and what kind of needs you see in Welcome Connect and by connecting with those families. So I would really encourage you just to start that conversation. Completing your profile does not obligate you to sponsor anyone, but it will give you the opportunity to get connected with Ukrainian seeking support. In the email, you will also receive a link to our Facebook group. So please join that and start messaging and chatting with other people who are sponsoring, because you are sponsoring in a community. You aren't doing this alone. There are resources and there are other people who are taking the same steps as you. And that's such a powerful thing to be connected with those folks. You will also receive a link to this webinar. So if you have friends and family and others in your community that you want to share the opportunity of sponsorship with, you will have the opportunity to send them a link to this webinar to help them understand what a transformative and important journey this is. You will also receive a survey, and we'd really appreciate your feedback. It's a short survey that you can share other topics for future webinars that you'd like to hear. You'll be able to share if you need one-on-one support, whether through our phone bank or through email, and other feedback that we would really appreciate hearing from you, because as I mentioned, my job is to support you in your sponsorship journey, and I would love to continue this conversation with you. So thank you again for helping to give newcomers a safe and welcoming home. We are so glad that you joined us this evening, and we look forward to seeing you again at the next webinar. Thank you.